Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Hasmik. I'm your host, and my guest with me here today is Patrick Elliott, and he is the founder of Remote Armenia, which is this really cool network of repatriates and also foreigners coming together and basically reinforcing remote work in Armenia. And Patrick will go ahead and speak a little bit more about his idea. So, Pat, before we get into the topic of normalizing repatriation, which is something that is a very, I guess, widely spoken about topic nowadays, both in the diaspora and Armenia. So I just wanted to get a little bit more about your repatriation journey.
I've been living this is my fifth country after leaving Canada. So for the last, I think it's been 10 years since I've actually lived in Canada. And it's interesting because if you plot my journey, it just keeps going further and further east until eventually leading back here to Armenia. So I was living in Poland for 5 years before this, and so I used to come very, very often because, as you know, I have some family here, and, it's just a 3-hour flight. Gradually, the desire to stay in Poland kind of waned, and the questions that was arising was where to next, and we started spending more and more time in Armenia, and it just became the logical next step that this is it's a really cool place to be, it's a cool place to live in, so we figured why not, and then obviously the war happened, and so the urgency kind of really came up afterwards, which was really to me that was a watershed moment of, okay, do we want a future for this place or not, and if not now, when, and if not me, who? So, yeah, we bought all of our tickets. We bought a property here, and we moved in. This was end of May, early June.
Cool, and I know your wife. She's non-Armenian. So had you guys traveled together to Armenia prior to your move?
Yeah, many times. She's Polish, but she's from Lithuania, so she speaks Russian fluently, and it's really interesting to see there's a lot of cultural similarities. So this wasn't an alien place for her to come to. In fact, it was in many ways more familiar than it is to me. So she's my translator when it comes to Russian terms and stuff that I don't understand. So she's, and there's also some cultural mores that she tends to understand more, which is very strange to me. The doctor in the hospital told her she has very good behavior. It doesn't translate to English, but in Russian apparently it makes perfect sense. To her, she was it's a very high compliment. I was that's a really weird thing for a service you're paying for to tell you have good behavior, but apparently it makes sense in Russian. So I mean, in many ways, this is it's not an alien place for her, which is pretty cool. I think it would have been more difficult if it was I had a fully Canadian wife or fully Western European, but so we ended up here.
Very cool. So yeah, that's awesome. There's no language barrier here, considering Armenia is a post-Soviet country. Mm-hmm. So okay, and tell us a little bit about Remote Armenia and some of the tangible benefits Remote Armenia can offer to those looking specifically to repatriate.
Sure. I mean, there's two stated missions for Remote Armenia. Ultimately, there's the tip of the iceberg, and then there's the beneath the iceberg. So the tip of the iceberg part ultimately is to help bridge that gap between diasporans and locals, whether that's through doing business and establishing yourself here. So the tagline is, live locally, think globally. So it's building your business here, particularly online, but there's other ways to do it as well, but building an online business here and being able to see clients outside of Armenia, but also employ local Armenians, or if you don't want to set up a business here, which I think you should, it's the tax advantages and so on are massive. But if you don't want to set up your business here, it's being able to connect with Armenians who live here and who do business here so that you can use them for, pay them a good salary and basically help build that business building skill. Now, the underground benefit for me, the underground mission statement, in a way, is to build a generation of Armenians who are self-sufficient, self-sustaining, who are self-actualized, right? There's a whole self-improvement component to this because there's not a very big self-care culture in Armenia. In many ways, the professional culture is still very, very Soviet. And so they aim to change that. But ultimately, what ends up happening is when you have, 10,000 Armenians who are self-made, who are living a life that is, above anything they ever thought possible. It's, they're literally, by definition, wealthy, even by Western standards, right? Because finding American clients who are willing to pay $1 to $5 or even $10,000 for your services is not unheard of, especially after this global pandemic where most people are working remotely. Most big companies have realized that remote work is not a detriment. It's very doable, and it can only be beneficial for Armenia to have a class of people who are wealthy, well-rounded, well-educated, happy, not interested in going anywhere. And not only does that lead by example, but it's also more difficult to manipulate or fall back on the previous corrupt practices of old that rotted Armenia from within. So to me, that's the ultimate goal, is to help bring about this the concept of individual responsibility in Armenia and in the broader Armenian community. I'm sorry, what was the second half of your question? What are tangible benefits for?
What are the tangible benefits Remote Armenia can offer to those looking to repatriate?
Right. Well, I mean, we do a variety of different things. Like we're going to be doing a live event very soon, actually. We're going to be doing a wine tasting / networking. But to me, it's creating a network of professionals who are either seeking a job or who are providing the job. So we've already had a big tech firm based in the Netherlands. Pardon me, we had a big tech firm based in the Netherlands that hired a couple people. Right now, one project that we're working on, there's a soldier who served in, he's still serving in Martakert, actually. But, he was 40 days into his service and the war started. And he and his military buddies wanted to leave. And he reached out saying he actually wants to stay and he wants to start a business. So we're going to be connecting him with a few people who are in the wine business, because that's what he's interested in. So it's creating that network primarily, and then the second half is, giving the skills, because a lot of people, they're not aware that a lot of their skill sets can be transformed into a high-paying business, and they just don't have the tools to get them there. So that's a big component of it as well. And at the end of the day, right, you can find cool cafes and nice restaurants anywhere in the world. There's nothing unique about Armenia in that sense. But what I find that's amazing is the connections that you're able to build. Like you can meet total strangers that end up becoming family. And, I've never, ever found that anywhere else. Any of the places that I've lived, the quality of the friendships are really amazing. So building that community, and it starts here. That's what gets people to stay, right? It's creating that network. So that's one of the main components, the main drivers here, the main benefits, because there's, other than that, things with, moving and registering your business and so on. That's something that other people, especially your office, can provide. So.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Thank you. And we're really excited about Remote Armenia and excited to see where it's gonna, lead and bring people back. So as a diasporan Armenian and repatriate, recent repatriate, how do you view the diaspora now after living in the country for some time now?
Ooh, gonna upset a few people. In a word, disconnected. I don't think there's a better word to describe it, because it's, I went to Armenian school, and we were raised on this Armenia that frankly just doesn't exist. I'll give you a very, very good example, right? When the diasporans are polled, what is their number one concern when it comes to Armenian issues is genocide recognition. When local Armenians are polled, even after the devastating war, their number one concern was the economic situation of the country. I know it's hard to believe, but Armenians, just like anywhere else in the world, are normal human beings who want to live a better life than their parents before them, and who want their children to live a better life than they did. And the good news for me is I believe that the everything that we want to achieve with Armenia and with Armenianness hinges on the economic viability of this place. In other words, it begins and ends here. And I think that diasporans should be taking a far more active role, particularly the louder ones on the internet. There is plenty that you should be doing, and if you really care about this place, you should. Now, I think that we need to radically change the way that Armenia interacts with the diaspora. I also don't believe there is such a thing as the diaspora. Right? There's just such a diversity of Armenians at this point that it's a meaningless term. But the way that we interact as a community and what it means to be Armenian has completely changed at this point, like completely. I know 100% purebred Armenian who is a Buddhist monk, and I know, I myself am half Armenian. My son is a quarter Armenian, but he has an Armenian name and is born in Armenia and is registered in Armenia. So, what does it mean anymore? I know Armenians who have like a drop of a drop. They don't speak any Armenian, but they moved here after the war and they're determined to build a life here. So I think we need to revisit what that means, and I think that ultimately our messaging needs to change completely, because for 30 years the message was like, you have a duty to Armenia. It's almost this religious thing. But what that did was that basically stopped us from asking some very serious questions about what does it mean to be Armenian? What is it that we're hoping to achieve? We all know what the past is, but what do we want the future to look like? And I think that bridging that gap between diaspora and Armenia, like, this place is not a Disneyland. It's not a place you come for 3 weeks in the summer and party on North Avenue and so on, and then you go home, and then you can, April 24th you march, and then you go back to being American or French or Russian or whatever. The more serious way to approach this is just coming into figuring out that Armenia is a place that you can build a really high standard of living, a good quality of life, that you simply pursuing just totally selfish interests, totally selfish, right? You want to feast every night at an amazing world-class restaurant? You can. You want to drink Armenian wines every single day just because you enjoy wines? You can. You want to buy an apartment for really cheap, renovate it to your taste for really cheap, do groceries for fairly cheap, live for really cheaply, and then have very cheap connections anywhere in Europe whenever you want, right? There's daily flights to Athens. The Wizz Air is starting up again. Ryanair just announced they're restarting their routes from Rome. So you can get around quite cheaply. Basically have a base where you spend 6 months out of the year. Even doing all of those things that I mentioned, you're doing more for Armenia than your casual passive nationalism and occasional donation to Himnadran. It's more substantial than a lot of what Armenians have been doing until this day. So,
absolutely. I can only say that you're just speaking my thoughts. I tend to agree with you. I mean, I feel like being here, and I've been here for about a year now. I'm from California.
Obviously.
And I feel like I think the word for me is Armeniacentric. I've just become more Armeniacentric. I've started thinking as though I'm actually from Armenia, which is
you are, though.
Yeah, I am.
Why wouldn't you be? This is where we're all from.
Yeah. I guess, I don't know. My parents were born here. I was born over there. There has been that disconnect, right, over a certain period of time. But coming here, I've filled in that gap. Mm-hmm. I've found a way to fill in that gap. So I'm in agreement.
But that's what's so cool, right? Is that you get to turn Armenia into your little slice of whatever it is that you want it to be. And you'll notice this when you're discussing with people who don't have any tangible connections to Armenia. The Armenia that they think exists really just doesn't resonate. It's just it doesn't exist in objective reality. And so they're on about trying to preserve, you're always here, we have to preserve the culture, we have to preserve Armenianness, but what does that even mean? You don't know what it means. What culture are you trying to preserve? It's like, it's an interesting thing, but again, to me, these are good things. Like, Armenians are people who don't necessarily respond very well to criticism. We're not very self-reflecting. We have no problem calling out all of the injustices done towards us, all of the wrongs that our neighbors are done, which these are all justifiable, these are all right. I just worry that sometimes this habit basically steals away from asking the important questions of how do we build a viable state here? How is it that we're going to build a home base for all Armenians when most of us just aren't even willing to actually come here and spend any substantial amount of time? It's kind of this odd, you hold the fort, I'll enjoy Glendale or Boston or Montreal or Toronto or whatnot. But it's really strange. Like, I know I'm seeing some people online who are just so passionate about preserving a place they've never set foot in. And so you got to ask yourself, like, do you prefer the comforting imaginary image of what you think Armenia should be, or do you want, because this place is not perfect. This place is full of problems, but it's also a really cool place. But, this requires the courage to come and explore it, to be faced with reality, because reality hits you pretty quickly when you come to Armenia. And see if you can build something viable here. Because, the people who come here all starry-eyed, they don't tend to last long, right? They come here from nationalist sentiments, and what happens is either they kind of, it's a bad term, but to de-radicalize, like they kind of understand the reality of this place, or they pack up and leave because they just can't reconcile these ideas. Whereas I think if you're coming here from a very rational perspective, and you're like, okay, let me see if I can make a life here, let me see if I can build habits and a lifestyle and build a circle of friends and see if I can actually enjoy living here objectively. Like, this can be a really, really cool place. This could be a really interesting chapter of your life that gives you really amazing memories if you end up leaving. But I think that Armenia has a lot to offer. Objectively, as somebody who's lived in 5 different countries, who has a wife who's a foreigner and 0 attachments to this place, who have, entirely foreign friends who have not a drop of Armenian blood, who are making a life here, looking at buying property here, like, if they see it but our own people don't, we need to ask ourselves if we're a serious nation that deserves to continue in history, or if our time has come and we just don't have the stomach to turn this place into a viable country.
Absolutely, and like yourself, I see it as a new beginning for a lot of people. And, we're at a stage in our country's history where we're working on bringing Armenians from abroad home, and it is one of the primary goals of this government. And what do you think will really drive repatriation en masse? Think 1940s, 1950s.
In a nutshell, economic opportunity, because that opens the door to everything else. So a country like Sweden that has a massive, generous welfare state. Now, personally, I don't believe welfare states attracts the best and the brightest of everywhere. You look at the qualitative difference of immigration to the United States as opposed to the European Union. But let's give the example, right, where Sweden can afford to say, we'll give you 800 euros per month as a stipend, we'll find you housing, we'll give you all kinds of benefits, and then this is what's going to offset their population decline, right? This is Germany did the same thing in 2015. They got 2 million new residents just overnight because you can offer all kinds of wonderful things. Armenia can't afford to do these kinds of things. So if we can't afford it, we go in the opposite direction. If we can't give things, what we do instead is you remove every single barrier to make it as so easy. It's a freaking no-brainer to move here. And I do believe that a country that did this well is actually Georgia. We don't often look north of the border, but they literally enshrined in the Constitution that you can't raise taxes, without any justification. Estonia did this as well. They put in the Constitution that no more than 9% of the population can work in the public sector, which means that you have the highest concentration of entrepreneurs per capita. They made it as physically just insanely simple to just register a business. Everything is digitalized. Everything is smooth. Everything is in English, in Russian, in Estonian. They made it as easy as physically possible. So the goal for this government, instead of saying how do we get more people to come, the question should just be, how do we make it as easy as possible so that it's a no-brainer? So you got to slash all the regulations, slash as many taxes as possible, slash the bureaucracy, slash all the loops. If you are interested, I could tell you some of these stories, but there are some headaches in coming here that just make absolutely no sense. And for a country that's effectively hemorrhaging people, there's no excuse to be mediocre when it comes to this. There's no excuse to be as bureaucratic as Armenia is. It's I'm sorry, it just doesn't make any sense. So yeah, it's got to be as easy as possible. And we do have like core demographics that would actually thrive here. Argentina, for example, there's 120,000 Armenians, and when polled, 70% of all young Argentinians want to leave the country. So we can extrapolate that and say that 70% of young Armenians in Argentina would like to leave the country. The average salary is $400 over there, $400 US. So Armenia is actually a higher paying place, especially the fact that most of them speak Spanish, which is fantastic because that opens up the door to doing business with all kinds of Latin American or Spanish speaking countries. So even if we get 1% of these people over, I mean, that's 12,000 Armenians who end up coming. Okay, let's say a huge chunk of those will be young, so let's take out 50% of that. That's still a substantial amount of Armenians who are going to come here, right? We have a bunch of Armenians in the Middle East, and it's a place that's extremely unstable. This place is free, whether you like it or not. This is a free country. I live here. I can speak my mind without fear, and that to me is the most important thing. So you have these people who are hanging there. They have business acumen. I mean, the government should just simply be saying, like, yeah, we're not going to provide anything. But if you come here and register your business, all of the import-export you do with Dubai, Qatar, Jordan, or Egypt or other Middle Eastern countries, there's no import tax on your business. If you want to hire 10 local Armenians, then you get 5 years of tax deferment on your corporate income tax. You hire 20 Armenians or more, that's 10 years. You buy an old abandoned Soviet factory and you renovate it using an Armenian construction crew. Great, here's X more benefit we're going to give you. And these are people who love doing business, they're good at doing business, and they need that stability. So it's a no-brainer for these people to literally just hop a 1.5 hour flight and establish themselves in Armenian language that they speak, a culture that they're familiar with. So really, at the end of the day, it all comes down to the economic situation. The security situation depends on the economic situation. The population situation depends on the economic situation. All of it comes down to that.
Got it. So, like governmental economic incentive.
Just get out of the way.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah, we
just
definitely
make
need
it,
to change the laws. I mean, we get so many complaints about the difficulties, especially with like going to Ovir and like getting your citizenship.
Believe me, I've been there.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay.
I mean, the biggest fear for anyone moving anywhere is having to deal with the bureaucracy. Like when I was living in Poland, thank God I had my wife who was managing all of that for me because she's fluent in Polish, obviously. But like having to deal with that stuff, like I hate it. I don't want to set foot in a government office. Like I would gladly pay to not have to deal with that stuff. So like these are serious complications. These are serious like issues, right? So Armenia needs to open up, make it as simple as possible. We can't offer a bunch of free stuff. We're not Western Europe. We don't have a massive welfare state backed by hardworking people. We don't have that. So it's very simple. You need to just / make it as easy as physically possible. Make it a no-brainer. It's already going in the right direction, which is why it actually is paying dividends. And actually, we had the first period of net immigration to Armenia rather than emigration until the war, unfortunately. But we were on the right track, and there's no reason why we should be deviating from that path. In fact, we should be doubling down on that.
Yeah, and I think along with doing these economic incentives, perhaps the state would fare well if it launched this like massive campaign at the same time, calling people home. Like similar to the past, It definitely brought people back. So does normalizing repatriation setting the level of emigration start from the state itself, or does it start with individuals?
It always starts with individuals. That'll always be my answer, just because I don't believe that I don't believe that the state, like, look, the basic function of the state is to protect the rights of its citizens, and it failed to do that last year. Plain and simple. Its most basic function, it proved that in the upper echelons, it's just incapable of doing so. So I don't put my hope in the state. I put my hope in people. Now, that said, there are a couple moves that are quite interesting that can be done. And again, a good example of that is Georgia. Estonia is another good example. Singapore is a very good example. Israel is a very good example. But I mean, we're failing when it comes to public relations. Georgia hired a bunch of American PR firms, and I'm telling you, when you go to Europe, every time I was telling people I'm Armenian, they go, "Oh, I would love to visit Georgia." I go, "Great, but I'm not from Georgia." But they see all the stunning mountainscapes, they see the monasteries, the good food, the wine. We have all of those things, and we haven't basically created a strategy to open ourselves up to the world. And it's really fascinating to me because the brand ambassadors for Armenia that we have are excellent. Like her or not, a single tweet from Kim Kardashian is going to generate more attention than a lot of the state bodies that we have here are able to do, right? So the point is to use the term, but to weaponize this in a way that Armenia is presented to diasporans and to the rest of the world as the go-to place. Like our neighbor, okay, Azerbaijan's a gas station. Like this is it. It's Saddam Hussein run gas station. Like, even objectively speaking, their greatest export is corruption scandals in the EU. Okay? Georgia has become a place for tourists, which is great. If you're a 19-year-old backpacker, you can eat for $5 a day in Georgia. You can get around. It's cheap. It's got the sea or so on. We can't compete with that. We don't have the sea. We don't have a lot of the landscape. Great, no problem. So what's left for us to do is to brand Armenia as the place where you come to do business. This is a place where you can come. No one's going to bother you. We have tons of startups that you can invest in for as little as $100. But this is true, by the way. They amended the laws. You can invest in Armenian startups from anywhere in the world for less than $100. I don't know how many diasporans are aware of this. But instead of giving money to charities, which is great, but you should be investing in Armenia. You should treat Armenia as an investment project rather than a charity case, because that empowers people far more. But so the point is to push this brand out there. This is a place that has a 5% turnover tax on international business. So if all of your clients are American or French or God knows what, and you live in Armenia, you get to keep 95% of what you earn, which is fantastic. So there's so many advantages. Again, if you're a tech company, it's deferred taxation. So under $50,000 in profits, you don't pay any tax. They're putting a flat corporate tax rate to bring it down to 20%. So these are really, really competitive things that we're just not making enough noise about, right? That you can live a standard of living in Armenia that you can rarely find anywhere else. You can live in Yerevan and you can enjoy, again, incredible food, incredible local wines. Like my wife and I always comment, we do not miss European wines. Like in Poland, every weekend it was a big decision. What are we going to try? This French one, this Spanish one, this Italian one, this Portuguese one. Now it's like, okay, now there's yet a new Armenian wine brand I need to try. Like we don't miss foreign wines. There's so many. The variety here is incredible. And I can hop into a car. Again, I can get a taxi that will cost me like $20 to get me 45 minutes out of town, and I have breathtaking mountains. I can go relax in Zalgadzor. I can go to Garni. I can, so there's that work-life balance. I think is something that you can't find anywhere else, and we're not pushing that. That this is a place where you come to do business. And I like giving this example a lot. This happened a year ago, but it's still not a year ago. So I was living here at the time, so 8 months ago. But a friend of mine, we were talking about this exact subject, and we're at a bar, and he turns around and he goes, "Look around us. We're in a room with 30 people, and there are 7 startup founders or business owners. Where else in the world will you find that kind of ratio?" So Armenia has a branding issue, and a lot of my diasporan friends that are lost. A friend of mine is a restaurateur, and he lost his restaurant during the lockdown. Now, he was a salesperson, very, very talented. We used to do sales together back in the day. Super talented guy, speaks French fluently, English fluently, Armenian fluently. And I was like, "Why don't you just come here?" He goes, "Yeah, but there's no money here." I'm like, "Dude, startups will gladly pay you $3,000 to $5,000 to either train their sales teams, manage their team, or like." There's no money here doesn't mean anything for someone who speaks multiple languages, has worldly experience, and can easily come and make a life here. They just don't know. He bought his ticket, by the way. He'll be here in March. But they just don't know, and that's the problem. It's a branding issue. So that, to me, is where the role of the state would be, is to either hire a PR firm the way other countries have done, or find Armenians. There are plenty of them who are willing to help. This, I think, is a resource that is largely untapped. I mean, we've got so many talented diasporans, like, everywhere in the world that can fill in a lot of the gaps that are left open, and they need to be engaged.
Absolutely. I've always thought that we've also had like a PR, branding issue. And I'm thinking I've always been thinking maybe I can use my public diplomacy experience to start, this agency here.
Let's do it.
Or like a government wing even. But I really hope that the upcoming Repatriation and Integration Center that, that we're planning on opening up soon, that can kind of serve as this PR, this PR hub. Kind of
are they going to do that?
And,
they're working on that?
I would hope it would kind of come along with it. I don't know if it's necessarily planned at the moment, but
because look, sorry to cut you off, but for me, whenever I work with new clients, so I have a advertising agency, but whenever I'm working with clients, right, no matter what business you're doing, the fundamentals are always the same. You need 3 things to build a successful business. You need, number 1, traffic. You need eyes on what you're doing. You can have the best product in the world, but if no one's looking at it, it's going to gather dust, right? Number 2, you need the right sales skills, right? You need to be able to convert those eyes who have never heard of your product or service into a paying customer and convince them to take their wallet out. And number 3, you need a quality product so that you don't get the buyer's remorse, you don't get the negative PR. Those are the 3 things that you need, right? So the same goes for Armenia. So you can have the Repatriation Center, but to me that's the middle part. That's that sales part, to turn eyes into a sale, or in this case, to turn random onlookers into people who want to build a life in Armenia. The last part is the quality product. I think that's where a lot of diaspora and repatriating comes in, right? You look at the waves of Syrians who came in during the Civil War. I don't know if you've been here before that, but my God, man, I'll tell you, restaurants in Armenia was just a freaking nightmare. And it's still like that in Georgia, by the way. So what changed is that the Syrians came and they brought that level of service, and now you have just restaurant here. It's night and day. We have friends who came for our wedding. They drove up into Georgia and then they came back and they're like, it's totally different. They went to this super fancy place. The waiter's just staring at them. The service here is excellent as a result of the Syrians coming in. So I think that last bit is where the diaspora can come in. But that front end, right, getting the eyes there, this is where there needs to be some dedicated either project, agency, or government wing or whatnot, but to get the attention onto Armenia. And that's where we're failing. We're not getting the message out there. And again, this might be a bit controversial, but frankly, I'm fed up of bumping into people. I'm Armenian. Oh, I know about the genocide. I appreciate that. Thank you. But I would like you instead to go, oh, Armenia, you guys developed those awesome robots, and when my kid was in the hospital, that was what kept him happy and sane. I would rather be known for our achievements today rather than our victimhood 100 years ago. To me, that's the more important, more empowering thing. And that's, even sorry, I'm getting critical, but even the tagline that Armenia came up with, open air museum, Jesus Christ, you're going to attract a bunch of geriatrics at this point? It's cool, open air museum, but nothing about that sounds sexy to me. Cool, open air museum. We need to rebrand this place. There's a lot of history which is amazing and needs to be pushed, but more importantly, Armenia needs to be the place. This needs to be come here to get rich. Azerbaijan, go there for corrupt caviar and oil baths if that's what you want, whatever, if that's what tickles your pickle. Georgia, go as a young tourist who doesn't have a whole lot of money to spend. But even the economy minister in an interview he brought that up, is that we prefer higher quality tourists who will stay longer and spend more and get more involved. But I think ideally you want people who are going to come for a few months, open a bank account here, build businesses here, employ locals, because this is how you build something sustainably. So you need the branding to get that attention. You really need to get that message out there that this is the place, this is the uncovered Wild West where you can go from nothing to everything with, overnight, because the skill is here, the talent is here, the languages are here. Armenia is unfortunately landlocked and unfortunately closed off on two sides, but the diversity of our diaspora is what's really powerful here, right? You'll walk down Yerevan and you'll hear French and Arabic and Farsi and Spanish and Russian and all kinds of languages. Like on my flight over, this woman turns to it's obviously highest Nancy, but living in Austria, and she speaks like perfect Austrian German. It's hilarious. But we are worldly people, and so we need to tap into that.
Absolutely. And kind of like a different question. So complete repatriation en masse, it sounds great on paper, and there are decades and centuries old communities outside of Armenia with significant contributions to the rest of the world. For instance, the Armenian Quarter in Israel, it's been around forever. And how do we strike a balance between mass repatriation and maintaining and strengthening these communities and everything that they can offer? And as a second question, should we even try to maintain those communities?
Ooh, gonna rustle a few jimmies here. Look, to answer your first question, realistically, I don't think that's a problem we're ever gonna have to deal with. The truth is that the target market for repatriation will be young, ambitious, tech-savvy Armenians who either don't have families or have young families. Right? It's just much easier for them to pick up and leave. And then the second half of that will be semi-retired or retired Armenians, and they will come and provide the skill set, which means, university professors in elite institutions that should be coming here and helping to reform the education system here. It would be doctors and surgeons and so on who are going to come here and help out, although we do have fantastic doctors, but at least make the hospital system more efficient and more effective. So to come with more advisory roles, and I know quite a few who actually have already done that and are doing that, and they live here, which is really cool. But really, realistically, those are going to be the two main chunks of people who are going to come here. It's not the person who's in his 40s, still kind of moving ahead in his corporate life, has 3 kids, and they're already in high school and they have all of their friends, and you're not just going to rip them away. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is it worth trying to strengthen them? No. Again, controversial to many, but Armenianness is diluted at this point. You can even see it statistically. Third-generation immigrants tend to not speak their native tongue. It's already happening, and a lot of Armenians are calling this white genocide. I don't like that term. This implies like some nefariousness that just doesn't exist. I'm not particularly concerned with that. Like I said, I think Armenianness should be voluntary. If you don't want anything to do with Armenia or Armenianness, totally fine. But I prefer that upfront honesty than someone who claims to really care about Armenianness but swears in Turkish every 2 words, doesn't set foot in Armenia, thinks that hummus is an Armenian national dish, and on we go. Like I'm sorry, or that the Rabbi's music is Armenian national music. Look, having a gold chain, driving a BMW while blasting Armenchik is like the opposite of what Armenianness actually is. So, if we're losing out on these people, I'm not that concerned. Again, it sounds dismissive, and I don't mean it in that way. But for me, I'm very utilitarian. Like, what are the, and this is the way that I approach, building businesses with my clients. It's what are the 3 or 4 things we can do that are really going to move the needle? And for me, it's how do we make Armenia as a state a viable place? There's so much heavy lifting to do that, I'm not really concerned with diasporans who want to feel Armenian or don't want to feel Armenian. A friend of mine who's 100% Armenian, I'll always remember this. He didn't want to march on the 100th anniversary of April 24th because there was a hockey playoffs game. He didn't, he couldn't miss the game. Your ancestors marched in the desert, but then turns around and calls me a half-breed, because I'm not fully Armenian. Like, I'm not concerned with people like that. It's not, like Armenians, we need to stare reality in the face. We really do. Like, we need to realize that the Crusaders are not going to come and save the first Christian country in the world. The world has moved on. We can't be marching and blocking bridges whenever bad things happen, but in the interim, not building this place into a sustainable place. And most importantly, we need to ask ourselves what it is that we're offering the world. We need to ask ourselves this question. What is our USP? What's our unique selling proposition? To me, it's make Armenia a place where you can come and invest. It's a free place. No one's going to bother you. You can be yourself. You can live yourself. By the way, this is how Israel is winning. A lot of people, they don't understand the strategy. They just think like Jews have this secret ability to get organized or so on, when they're just as fractured and as divided as we are. But, Tel Aviv, you're going to have like multicultural, like ultra gay person sitting next to a woman in a burqa or whatnot. But the point is, they turned Israel into a cool place that their enemies would rather live in than rather bomb. And this was a long-term strategy that panned out. I mean, for Christ's sake, you have them making friends with Saudi Arabia today. Even 10 years ago, if you had told me that, I said, you're smoking something.
And other Arab countries.
Yeah, but Saudi Arabia is like the pinnacle, right? Of these are guys who like, there's literally zero ideological difference between them and
right.
The Islamic State. There's no difference. The only reason, anyway, we won't get started into that. But the point is, their strategy panned out. Is that you had all these young kids of sheikhs and so on coming and partying in Tel Aviv, of course, secretly, but and drinking alcohol and so on. But that does something, right? So ideally, to not take credit for this, a friend of mine who's a special forces officer in Kelbajar. So before anyone goes crazy, he was a soldier who served. But he's also the founder of a very successful Armenian startup. So he's putting his money where his mouth is. But for him, the goal is to turn Armenia into a place that is so attractive that our enemies would rather come here and work for our startups than actually bomb us. And to me, that's the ultimate victory, right? It's to neutralize your enemy, not militarily, but to the point where there isn't even the will to fight us anymore. So we went on a tangent. I apologize, but that's
it's really great. Wow. So how do we prepare the natives of the Republic of Armenia for mass repatriation? What's the role of the repatriate?
Interesting question. There definitely needs to be you need to treat Armenia as Armenia's immigration policy as like a serious immigration policy, right? Where there has to be some way to integrate people. I do think a lot of it does happen organically, but on the other hand, you do also have like some that are there's some pretty big differences in our communities. That said, I think the familiarity is still strong enough that it doesn't lead to any massive problems. And the other thing too is like you'll notice in a lot of the startups and so on, you'll have this mixing, right, of new Armenians and locals. So that tends to happen seamlessly with the younger generation, especially like anyone under 30 now. They're pretty much within Yerevan or even larger cities like Dilijan and Varanzor less so, but Gyumri and so on. A lot of them will be speaking English fairly fluently, actually. They'll be watching, they'll grow up watching Netflix and Western shows and so on and so forth. So I think that gap will naturally bridge itself, but I think there does need to be some kind of formal structure in place. That's for integrating the diasporans. In terms of the locals, again, I think at the end of the day, sunlight is the best disinfectant, right? So it really just comes down to exposure. It's really just coming in larger and larger numbers, which there already are. And frankly, whenever people here find out that I'm Armenian and locals, I have never once had any local tell me this isn't your home. Actually, quite the opposite. When they find out I live here, whether it's the taxi driver or cleaning lady or so on, they'll always say like, this is your home. So there is that welcomeness, which I think is quite cool. It's already there. So the good news is there's not that much work to do in that regard.
Awesome. And to really drive home this super insightful conversation that we've been having, what is Remote Armenia's role to help transition repatriates and digital nomads into becoming integrated into Armenian society?
I think, like I said, the network is the most important thing. You'll come for the benefits, but you'll stay for the community. So having a place where you can meet like-minded people, where you can network effectively, and you'll be able to solve problems. Right, so you'll have a startup idea and you're missing a designer. You can easily just come to one of our events or just post in the group and say, hey, I need a designer for X, Y, and Z with X, Y, and Z specs, and it's fairly easy to find. And I've noticed there's recently been an influx of Lebanese Armenians, which is really cool. So that's what I mean. Like a lot of these people, this goes back to one of the earlier points that I was making, but a lot of these people want to come. They just don't realize it. I want to finish on a really cool story that I found was really inspiring, because it just shows you how far Armenia has come even in the last 5 years, because you didn't used to have these kinds of things. But I met a Beirutsi in February, so it hasn't even been a year yet. And she told me she has like some kind of tech skill. I don't remember what it was, but really she loves animals. Her dream is to start like an animal hotel or something like that. Now I checked in with her. This was in the end of the summer, so August or September. See how she was doing. She's a professional dog walker. She's doing so well that she had to hire somebody else to help manage the load. So
Wow.
The point is that usually in impoverished countries, you tend to push towards like secure jobs, right? Doctors, engineers, and so on and so forth. And so the fact that this can happen in Armenia really tells you that you for the first time ever have an organic middle class, not just who can afford a dog walker, but where you can make a career out of something that you love, out of your passion, right? I'm seeing artists now there's a calligrapher that I follow that I really like. He's making a living, he does his calligraphy and then he sells them for like $100, posters and so on. Gorgeous. Again, you didn't used to have that. That didn't happen in Armenia. I knew plenty of people who were professionals by trade and secretly they had a spare room where they would conduct their art or so on and so forth. So it's really cool to see Armenia head in that direction. And the truth is, in 2022, the world is much smaller than it used to be. You can be an artist from a tiny island in the Philippines, but if you have an internet connection, you can turn it into an NFT or something like that. There's so many solutions now. So really, I think that Remote Armenia's goal is to provide those ideas, those brainstorming sessions of what are the fundamentals you need to have in place to turn what you love to do into a valuable service, give you the sales skills and the traffic skills to find the right clients and convert them into people who are willing to pay for your work so that you can actually sustain yourself, do work that you love, and live a well-balanced, happy life here in Armenia rather than anywhere else.
Awesome. Well, Armenia never ceases to surprise me, so just like yourself. So, Patrick, I wanted to thank you again for joining me today and sharing your super insightful thoughts. I'm really excited about Remote Armenia and the way it's going to really help people, both repatriates and foreigners, come to Armenia, do business, stay for the community, think globally, live locally. So, thanks again.